So hello and welcome again to What is Nameter Project Research Training. In this session, I'm going to cover with you the basic principles of ethics in qualitative research. We will be talking about the fundamental principles in ethics and identify the specific considerations when we consider when we're doing qualitative research. And then I'm going to have a quick overview over the principles of research ethics that we have signed up to at Teesside University, as this is where we are conducting this research. Obviously, this will also involve the research ethics principles followed at IIT. However, in this case, we were just going to overview them just to kind of show what it means to be conducting ethical research. So ethics pertains to doing good and avoiding harm. That's basically a general definition without really going into the philosophical background of that. So it's about, when it comes to research, it's about balancing the need to conduct research and obtain results that can be generalized and used for the public good with the potential harm that it might inflict on research participants, and ensuring that such harm is minimized and diminished. This applies to not just qualitative research. Obviously, it applies to all types of research, medical research, or research that we conduct using quantitative methods. And so the fundamental principles have been discussed over many years, but can be summarized by, I found, summarized by several authors. In this case, Maltner and Birch talk about autonomy, confidentiality, respect, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. So these are, if you like, generic principles that we must follow when we consider research that can be described and evaluated as ethical. I will be covering respect and autonomy, beneficence, and justice. Respect and autonomy, it's basically about the people's need for privacy and their dignity. So it's protecting that, and so it's respecting their right to, a private life and a dignified life. And the reason we discuss that is that in the past research has been done where that has relied basically on abusing the health and well-being of research participants. Sort of experiments on people in Nazi Germany is an example of that, and so it's in the idea of countering those practices. And so the principle here is to inform the research participant and engage them and make sure that they understand the research aims, the purposes of you conducting this research, and also make sure that they understand the potential risks that might, entail. And here it's crucial that informed consent is obtained. So when they consent to taking part, they actually know what is this research about, how might they be at risk, what benefits might they have, and then to absolutely ensure that they understand that, and not just to not share that information with them due to not having enough time or not giving that aspect the due importance. In terms of beneficence, and so this is to ensure that no harm is done to the research participants. This is, in this case, we have to acknowledge what risks, if there are any, that the participants might have to endure, and ensure that these are diminished. We want to ensure that there's a ratio of benefit to risk, and maximize benefits and minimize risks. And so in this case, no harm is done. It has to include not just physical harm, but also any psychological harm or social harm in relation to the participants' connections and networks with others, as well as their position within their community and their ability to access services and obtain jobs, etc. And finally, talking about justice, this is about, this is a slightly wider context. So we're talking about the differences, the power differences between different individuals in society, but also, importantly, between the research participant and the researcher, and ensure that the impacts of that are diminished as much as possible. When we are designing our research, we have to make sure that the benefits of the research are equitable, as they can be. They benefit all equally, all members of society in an equal way. And for example, we avoid, conducting research in a way that, for example, puts risks and burdens on the poorer communities for the benefit of richer groups or richer countries. So, for example, conducting drug trials on poor people for drugs that can be used by richer individuals. So it's avoid having people endure the burdens of research, and these can be as simple as the time taken to take part in an interview, the effort that the participant has to put in sharing information and engaging with the researcher, and making sure that if they are going to be doing that, then they receive the due benefit from the research further down the line. In the same way as others do. So, having discussed the sort of main principles of ethics in research, in qualitative research, some topics are particular to the way we do research qualitatively. One aspect is the sensitivity of these topics. So, not that quantitative research might not have sensitive information, but it's more likely and it's much more present in qualitative research, things that are particularly private or that are complicated in terms of impacts they have on people, particularly in social and health research. So in this case, we have to consider what is permitted for discussion in a particular setting. And these can be things that the society deems to be private or okay to talk about or okay to have or to suffer from. Also things that can be sacred, so thinking about cultural requirements here, cultural sensitivities of what is sacred and cannot be harmed or discussed in a not casual, nonchalant way. Things like that pertain to religious beliefs or spiritual practices. Other things are discussions around topics that might stigmatize that individual in relation to their position in society and other groups. So this could be where they come from, their past experiences, for example, societies where divorcee women, for example, might find themselves ostracized, and so on. So how might these stigmas kind of pertain to engaging in that kind of research where such a topic is discussed? A second aspect of qualitative research ethics is vulnerability. So typically, we define vulnerability in terms of groups, such as, for example, children or elderly. But others too can become vulnerable depending on the research context. So in particular societies, such as my previous example, let's say divorced women or people of a particular sexual orientation, where societies have not accepted that. We also should consider personal biographies and individual vulnerabilities that intersect with group-based vulnerabilities. For example, personal circumstances such as having had a mental health issue or a significant life event. Again, I bring up divorce, but this is just an example. There are many things within individuals' personal experiences and circumstances that might make them vulnerable in relation to accessing certain services or being able to engage fully in society. So it's about being sensitive and aware of how these vulnerabilities might play in a situation where a research is being conducted. around those issues. So in the case of what's in a meter, for example, access to water for cleanliness rituals or cleanliness practices in society, and what that might entail in terms of the person's relationship with others in work or school. These can be vulnerabilities or sensitivities that are generated as a result of that service being available or not. And it's how we consider these issues and how we engage with them and handle them in a research context that is important to discuss. So consider how such individuals can access these services and infrastructures, and what opportunities and rights do they have or have been denied. And ensure that vulnerable research participants are not included in our research in order to avoid bias. So whilst it might be difficult to reach vulnerable individuals when conducting fieldwork, it's important that we do put all effort in order to be able to reach those individuals and engage with them and find out particular vulnerabilities. Otherwise, we risk producing research that kind of glosses over important inequalities and justice implications of our research, which is one of the main principles of research ethics that as we have discussed. And finally, an important element of practicing ethical research is, ensuring or securing ethical clearance. So obtaining ethics approval from research ethics boards is, is very important, and it's good practice. And to ensure that researchers conduct ethical research, ethical clearance must be obtained. And this is based on evaluating the researcher's ability to adhere to the ethical principles. Now, typically, different countries have outlined research boards in different countries, and universities that adhere to those research boards will have outlined different ethical principles. We find that globally they're very much similar, with only minor differences. And so I'm sharing with you, for example, Teesside University's research ethics. And as you can see, they are summarized as in 6 principles. The first one is about avoiding harm. So again, that relates to respect to beneficence. And principle 2, ensuring that research is designed, reviewed, and undertaken to ensure adherence to highest standards. So this is in relation to securing ethical clearance properly. Principle 3 is centers on informed consent and ensuring that the information provided to the research participants is clear, easily understood, and ensuring that the research participant has the capacity to understand what they are being involved in. Now, an important point here to mention is individuals that cannot provide informed consent, such as children or individuals typically under the care of others. So again, it's about making sure that the ethical guidelines are being adhered to in terms of who is in support or care of those individuals, and how can ethical clearance be obtained through them. The fourth principle, avoiding coercion and malpractice in research ethics, such as undue influence, manipulation. So ensuring that when researchers take part in a research project, that they are taking part voluntarily, they're not being forced to be interviewed, for instance. And principle 5 is on confidentiality of information. Now, we're going to be talking more on confidentiality in the next session. But these are legal requirements that, with respect to the protection of personal data. And principle 6 is about disclosing any conflicts of interest, and how we might publish this research and what impacts the publication of research would have. So again, this is about ensuring the avoidance of malpractice. So, to revise what we have discussed today, we have identified the basic principles and fundamental principles of ethical research: respect, autonomy, justice, beneficence, and so on. We have identified the ethical considerations specific to qualitative research, particularly sensitive issues and sensitive topics that tend to be covered in qualitative research, as well as vulnerability. And finally, we kind of overviewed quickly, but sort of generally, the principles of research ethics that we apply at Teesside University, which are based on the UK Ethical Board's principles. And so, by doing so, we have hopefully covered what it means to be conducting ethical research and the importance of gaining ethical clearance. I will leave the sort of details of the Teesside University's principles for you to read, and you can compare it, for example, to IIT's ethics practice code of conduct, for instance, and other universities and other countries' code of conduct when it comes to conducting research. So in the next session, we will talk about safeguarding. So these are, in practice, things that you could do to ensure that your ethical practice, your research practice is ethical, and maybe go over some other reading material that can be of benefit. Right, thank you.